I would never disagree with Alan Hirsch, but I believe we've lost our missional edge because we've forgotten what our mission is, what our purpose is. I think we've lost our missional edge because we're skeptical of the fullness the Holy Spirit has to offer, not just in our lives, but in the life of the world. I think we've lost our missional edge because we trust our minds more than the mind of Christ. I think we've lost our missional edge because we've forgotten the power of our first encounter with Jesus. We've become independent instead of dependent. We've become proud and arrogant instead of meek and humble. So for me, it goes first and foremost, if you want to be a leader of the church, then you first need to be a radical follower of Jesus Christ. When I used to do retreats with ordinands, I started with this question: tell me about your call. And I don't want to hear about your call to ministry. Tell me about your call to follow Jesus. And Carolyn, I remember the first time I did that, I wanted to weep, because these are wonderful people. They were about to be ordained in the church, and they could not articulate their call to follow Jesus.
Wow.
Because they had been so conditioned to rehearse a call to a role.
Right.
A call to a task. I know some people don't appreciate his theology, but I reread every year Henry Nouwen's book, Life of the Beloved, because I need to be reminded that it is not about what I do for God. It's about who I am because of who God is and because of who God says that I am. And boy, I think if we get in touch with our first love, if we tend our first love, we will then be able to experience the kind of leadership that God is yearning for his church to know. When you think about apostles, apostles do things like communications and recruitment and marketing and strategizing and organizing. But their giftedness as an apostle and all that comes because of that is done through the power of the Holy Spirit, with a complete allegiance to the mission of Christ and the purpose of the church. Prophets are ones who remind us that God says, this is who you are. This is who you are to be. This is what you are to do. I have spent years trying to remind the church, listen, we've got one task.
Yes.
And that's to introduce at least one more person to Jesus.
Yes.
And it's Jesus who changes lives one at a time, which leads to families being transformed, which leads to workplaces being transformed, which leads to communities being transformed, and then states, and then nations, and then the world. And when people are clear about what it means to follow Jesus, then God can work in them to make them leaders who are dependent and surrendered to the Holy Spirit. And they're going to move where the Spirit moves. They're going to lead where the Spirit leads, and they're going to become people who God will do the impossible through.